They say rejection is the cruelest blade, sharper than steel, deeper than any wound the flesh can bear. We grow up believing that if we're just good enough, kind enough, obedient enough, we'll earn the love we deserve. That someone will see our worth and choose us. But here's the bitter pill they don't tell you in those bedtime stories. Sometimes the person who's supposed to choose you has already decided you're disposable. And sometimes, the most dangerous thing you can do is refuse to accept it. I learned that truth the night I stood before the Alpha King, the most powerful shifter in 5 territories, and spoke the words that should have gotten me killed. I refuse to be your bride. 6 words. Simple. Clear. Suicidal. They tell you that honesty is a virtue, that speaking your truth sets you free. What they don't mention is that freedom and death often arrive hand in hand. And when you're standing in a throne room surrounded by wolves who could tear you apart before you took your next breath, the difference between bravery and stupidity becomes paper thin. His reaction didn't come with roars or violence. It came with silence, the kind that makes your blood crystallize in your veins, that turns your bones to ice from the inside out. He simply looked at me with those amber eyes that had seen centuries pass, that had watched kingdoms rise and fall, and he smiled. Not a kind smile, not even an angry one. It was the smile of a predator who'd just realized his prey had done something unexpected, something interesting. And in that moment, as the temperature in the room dropped and every wolf in attendance held their breath, I understood with absolute clarity that I hadn't freed myself from anything. I had just chained myself to something far more terrifying than an unwanted marriage. I had gotten his attention. Before Evelyn's story unfolds, a quick note. If you love tales of broken souls finding wholeness, you'll want to check out this book titled The Alpha's Second Chance, now showing on your screen. It's a story about redemption, second chances, and love that refuses to give up. Links in the description below. Now, let's dive into Evelyn's world. Chapter 1. 3 days before I rejected the Alpha King, my father sold me. He didn't use those words, of course. Fathers never do when they're trading away their daughters like livestock. He called it an opportunity, a great honor, a chance to serve the pack in ways your sister never could. My sister, perfect, fertile, shifted Tamara, who'd produced 2 healthy pups by age 22, and whose wolf form was so beautiful that visiting alphas wrote poems about her silver coat. Tamara, who my father actually loved. I was the other one. The broken one. The daughter who'd never shifted despite being 24 years old, whose womb had been declared barren by 3 separate pack healers, whose mate had publicly rejected her at the autumn gathering 2 years ago, because what's the point of a wolf who can't be a wolf? His name was Derek. We'd known each other since childhood. I'd loved him since I was 16. He'd looked me in the eye, in front of 200 witnesses, and said those words. Then he'd walked away, and claimed Tamara's best friend as his mate instead. They had their first pup 9 months later. I told myself I was over it. I told myself that the humiliation had scabbed over, that the wound had closed. But wounds don't close just because you stop looking at them. They just fester in the dark. Evelyn. My father's voice cut through my thoughts. I stood in his study, the room where he conducted pack business, made decisions that affected hundreds of lives, and apparently, bartered away the daughters he had no use for. Are you listening to me? Yes, father. The lie came easily. I'd been lying to him for years. Yes, I'm fine. Yes, I'm happy. Yes, I understand why Tamara got the nicer room, the better clothes, the education at the capital. Yes, I know it's because she has value and I don't. The Alpha King has requested a bride. He said it like he was discussing the weather, not my entire life. His advisors approached me last week. Apparently, he's decided it's time to produce an heir. My stomach dropped. And you offered me. I offered the pack's service, he corrected, as if the distinction mattered. Tamara is already mated, and the king's representatives were very clear that he wants an unmated female. You're the only eligible option. Eligible. What a word. Like I was qualified for this. Like I'd passed some kind of test. In reality, I was just the only option he was willing to waste. What if I refuse? The question escaped before I could stop it. My father's face hardened. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and intimidating even without his wolf. As pack beta, he'd spent 40 years enforcing the alpha's will, crushing dissent, maintaining order. Gentleness wasn't in his vocabulary, especially not with me. You won't refuse. It wasn't a suggestion. But what if I did? I pressed, knowing I shouldn't, unable to stop myself. What if I said no? He stood, moved around the desk, and I instinctively took a step back. He noticed. Something flickered in his eyes, not quite guilt, but maybe its distant cousin, regret, perhaps, that his daughter flinched from him. Evelyn, listen to me very carefully. His voice dropped to that deadly quiet register he used when dealing with wolves who'd broken pack law. The Alpha King doesn't make requests. He makes commands that sound like requests because he's being polite. If you refuse, he'll take it as a declaration of hostility. Not just from you, from our entire pack. So I don't have a choice. None of us have choices when it comes to kings. He turned away, looking out the window at the pack lands, the forests and fields that had been our home for generations. The Alpha King could crush us without breaking a sweat. He has 12 packs under his direct command and alliances with 20 more. If he decided we'd insulted him, we'd be dead or scattered within a week. Then why does he want a bride from a nothing pack in the middle of nowhere? I asked. He could have any female he wanted. There are alpha daughters, powerful shifters, females who could actually give him strong heirs. Why me? My father was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. I don't know. His representatives didn't explain. They simply said he required a bride, gave their specifications, and I provided your name. Specifications. Like ordering furniture. What specifications? Unmated. Between 20 and 30 years old. Able to read and write. He paused. They didn't ask about shifting ability, because they assumed any adult wolf could shift. Because it never occurred to them that someone like me existed broken in such a fundamental way that my own body rejected what I was supposed to be. When? My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Tomorrow night. They're sending an escort at dusk. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours to say goodbye to the only life I'd ever known. However miserable it had been. Less than a day to prepare myself for. What? Marriage to a male I'd never met? A male who'd ruled the territories for over a century, who was feared by every pack, who reportedly hadn't taken a bride in 70 years. You should pack your things, my father said, still not looking at me. Your mother has prepared appropriate clothing. Does she know? I asked. Does Tamara? Your mother knows, Tamara. He trailed off. I'll tell her at dinner. Of course. Can't upset perfect Tamara with the news that her disposable sister is being sent away. Better to tell her last. When it's too late for her tender heart to feel guilty about it. Is that all, Father? The formality felt appropriate. This wasn't a conversation between parent and child. This was a superior informing a subordinate of their new assignment. Evelyn. He finally turned back to face me. And for just a moment, I saw something in his expression that might have been concern, or maybe just discomfort, at having to look at the daughter who reminded him of his failures. The Alpha King is old, powerful. He's survived challenges that would have killed lesser wolves 100 times over. He's not cruel, as far as anyone knows, but he's not gentle either. Are you telling me to be careful, or are you trying to make me feel better about being sold off? His jaw tightened. I'm telling you to be smart. Keep your head down. Do what's expected of you. Don't draw attention to yourself. The Alpha King wants a bride who can give him an heir and stay out of his way. If you can do that, you'll be fine. If you can do that. As if I could give anyone an heir. As if my barren womb wasn't the primary reason I was disposable enough to send to a king who probably didn't even care that his new bride was fundamentally defective. I understand. I moved toward the door, eager to escape before the composure I'd been clinging to finally shattered. Evelyn. I stopped but didn't turn around. It's better this way, my father said quietly. You'll have safety, status. You'll be a queen, technically. That's more than you would have had here. More than I would have had with you, I heard in the silence. more than a rejected, shifted, barren daughter deserves. I left without responding, because what was there to say? He was right. Here, I was nothing, a constant reminder of everything wrong with our bloodline. A daughter who couldn't shift, couldn't breed, couldn't do the most basic thing a female wolf was supposed to do. At least as the Alpha King's unwanted bride, I'd be nothing somewhere else. I climbed the stairs to my room, the small one at the end of the hall, the one that used to be storage before they cleared it out for me when Tamara needed more space for her growing family. My books were still scattered across the desk where I'd left them that morning. Stories, histories, poems, the only escape I'd ever found from the reality of my worthless existence. I'd told myself stories since I was a child, made up worlds where girls like me mattered, where being different wasn't the same as being broken. I'd whispered them to myself at night, used them to drown out the sound of my father praising Tamara at dinner, the whispers of pack members discussing my failures, Derek's voice saying, "What's the point?" over and over in my memory. Tomorrow, I'd be living in a different kind of story, not one I'd chosen, not one I wanted, but at least it would be different. I started packing, my hands moving mechanically as my mind raced ahead to tomorrow night, to the moment I'd meet the Alpha King, to whatever fate awaited me in his territory. I didn't let myself cry. I'd learned years ago that tears changed nothing, that pain was just something you carried until you forgot it was there. I packed my books carefully, wrapped my few possessions in the traveling bag my mother had left outside my door, and tried not to think about the fact that in 24 hours, I'd be standing in front of a male powerful enough to crush my father's entire pack, expected to smile and accept my role as his broodmare, even though we both knew I couldn't give him what he wanted, even though I was already planning the words I'd say when the moment came. I refused to be your bride. 6 words that would probably get me killed, but at least I'd die having chosen something for myself, even if that choice was just how I'd meet my end. At least I'd die honest. Chapter 2. The escort arrived exactly at dusk, just as my father had promised. I watched from my window as 3 black vehicles rolled through the pack gates, sleek, expensive things that looked utterly out of place against our modest territory. We were a working pack, a farming pack. Our vehicles were practical trucks, caked with mud and years of use. These looked like they cost more than our entire compound. The Alpha King's wealth on display, even in his transportation. My mother had laid out my traveling clothes on the bed that morning without speaking to me. A deep blue dress, simple but well made, with a high collar and long sleeves. Modest, appropriate for a bride being delivered to her new mate. I stared at it for a long moment before putting it on, my fingers clumsy with the buttons. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The dress fit well. My mother had always been good with measurements, even if she'd never been particularly good at mothering me. My dark hair hung loose down my back, unmarked by the braids that mated females wore. My gray eyes looked too large in my pale face, shadowed with sleepless nights and borrowed time. I looked exactly like what I was, a sacrifice dressed up as a bride. There was a soft knock at my door. "Evelyn?" Tamara's voice, tentative and careful. "Can I come in?" I almost said no. Almost told her to leave me alone with my last few moments of privacy. But some masochistic part of me wanted to see her. Wanted to look at my sister one final time and confirm what I'd always known, that she was better than me in every way that mattered. "It's open." She slipped inside, closing the door behind her. Tamara was beautiful in the effortless way of women who'd never had to question their worth. Her blonde hair caught the fading light, her blue eyes were clear and kind, and even after 2 pregnancies, her figure was perfect. She was everything the pack valued, everything our father loved, everything I wasn't, and she'd never been cruel about it, which somehow made it worse. "I just heard," she said, and there were actual tears in her eyes. "Father told me at lunch. Evelyn, I'm so sorry. I didn't know they were going to." "It's fine." I cut her off before she could finish the thought, before her pity could suffocate me. "It's an honor, remember? A chance to serve the pack. Don't do that." She moved closer, reaching for my hand. I let her take it because refusing would have required energy I didn't have. "Don't pretend this is what you want. What I want doesn't matter." The truth sat between us, heavy and familiar. "It never has. That's not true. Isn't it?" I pulled my hand away, gentler than I felt. You got to choose your mate. You got to stay here, raise your pups, live the life you wanted. I get shipped off to a male I've never met, because I'm the only daughter father can afford to lose. Tamara flinched. He loves you. No, he doesn't. I said it without anger, without heat. Just fact. He tolerates me. He feeds me and houses me because pack law requires it. But love? Tamara, he's never loved me. You know that as well as I do. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. Because what could she say? We'd both grown up in the same house, watched the same dynamics play out year after year. She'd gotten the praise, the attention, the pride. I'd gotten the disappointment, the silence, the careful distance of a father who couldn't quite look at his broken daughter without seeing his own failure reflected back. I wish things were different, she finally said. So do I. I picked up my bag, testing its weight. Everything I owned that mattered fit in one travel case. But they're not, and wishing doesn't change anything. Will you write to me? Her voice cracked. Let me know you're okay, if I can. I didn't promise more than that. I had no idea what my life would look like after tonight, what freedoms I'd have, whether the Alpha King would even allow me to maintain contact with my former pack. Take care of your pups, Tamara. Be happy, Evelyn. I need to go. They're waiting. I left before she could say anything else, before her tears could make me feel things I couldn't afford to feel. Grief was a luxury, and I had none left to spare. My father waited in the foyer, dressed in his formal beta attire. The Alpha King's representatives stood with him, 2 males and 1 female, all of them radiating the kind of power that came from proximity to ultimate authority. They weren't alphas themselves, but they served one, and that made them more dangerous than most wolves I'd ever meet. The female stepped forward first. She was tall, elegant, with dark skin and calculating eyes that assessed me in a single sweeping glance. Evelyn Ivy? Yes. My voice came out steady. Small victory. I am Lydia, the Alpha King's chief of staff. These are my associates, James and Victor. We'll be escorting you to the capital tonight. The journey will take approximately 4 hours. Do you have any questions? 1,000 questions. Why me? What does he want? Will he kill me when he finds out I'm defective? How long do I have before he realizes this was all a terrible mistake? No questions, I said instead. Lydia's lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Very well, if you'll follow us. My father cleared his throat. Evelyn. I turned to look at him, and for just a moment, his careful mask slipped. He looked old suddenly, tired in a way I'd never noticed before. Be well. Not I love you, not I'll miss you. Just be well, the same thing he'd say to any pack member leaving on a long journey. Goodbye, Father. I didn't call him anything warmer because we'd never had anything warmer between us. At least we were honest at the end. The November air was cold when we stepped outside, promising winter in the weeks ahead. The rest of the pack had gathered to watch my departure not out of affection, but curiosity. The Beta's strange daughter, being taken away by the Alpha King's people. It was probably the most interesting thing that had happened here in years. I kept my chin up as we walked to the vehicles, refused to let them see me falter. If this was my last act in this place, I'd do it with whatever dignity I could salvage. Victor opened the rear door of the middle vehicle, and I slid inside. The interior was leather and luxury, climate-controlled and pristine. Lydia climbed in beside me while the males took the front seats. The door closed with an expensive-sounding thunk, sealing me inside. Comfortable? Lydia asked as the vehicle began to move. Yes, thank you. Politeness was armor. I wore it carefully. Good. She pulled out a tablet, began scrolling through something. We have some paperwork to complete during the journey. Legal formalities, mostly. You'll need to sign several documents acknowledging your understanding of your new role and responsibilities. Of course. I watched the pack lands disappear through the window, the familiar forests and fields fading into darkness. Somewhere in one of those houses, Tamara was probably crying. My father was probably already moving on, his duty discharged, his useless daughter finally disposed of properly. You're very calm, Lydia observed. Most females in your position are either terrified or overly excited. Should I be terrified? I asked. Or excited? She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. That depends entirely on you. The Alpha King is complex. He values intelligence, discretion, and obedience. If you can provide those things, you'll find your life quite comfortable. And if I can't? Let's hope it doesn't come to that. She handed me the tablet. First document. This acknowledges that you're entering into this union willingly and of your own free choice. I almost laughed. Willingly. Free choice. As if I'd had any say in this at all. But I took the tablet, scanned the legal language that essentially said I couldn't later claim coercion, and signed my name. One by one, she walked me through the documents. Property transfers, apparently. I was now technically owned by the Crown, though they didn't phrase it that way. Medical release forms, confidentiality agreements, about anything I might see or hear in the capital. By the time we finished, I'd signed away every right I'd theoretically had as a pack member, exchanging them for the dubious privilege of being the Alpha King's bride. There's one more thing, Lydia said as I handed back the tablet. The Alpha King values privacy. Your wedding ceremony will be intimate. Just you, him, and the necessary witnesses. No celebration, no pack gathering. He prefers to keep personal matters private. I understand. Another thing I had no control over. At least I wouldn't have to smile through a public ceremony while hundreds of strangers watched me bind myself to a male I'd never met. We'll arrive at the capital around 10 o'clock, she continued. You'll be taken to your quarters, given time to refresh yourself. The ceremony will take place at midnight. Midnight. Of course. Everything about this felt like a dark fairy tale, the kind where the princess gets eaten by the wolf at the end. Will I meet him before the ceremony? I asked. The Alpha King? No. He'll see you for the first time at the altar. Lydia's expression was carefully neutral. It's tradition. His tradition. Probably. His rules. His world that I was being absorbed into whether I wanted it or not. I turned back to the window, watching the darkness rush past. We'd left the familiar territories behind, entering lands I'd only read about in books. The capital was north, built into the mountains where the first packs had settled centuries ago. They said the Alpha King's fortress was carved from the mountain itself, that it had stood for 500 years, that wolves who entered uninvited were never seen again. I was entering invited. Somehow, that felt worse. Can I ask you something? I said after a long silence. You may ask. Lydia didn't promise an answer. Why me? There must be hundreds of unmated females who'd be better suited for this. Stronger. More. I searched for the word. More valuable. Lydia was quiet for so long I thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. The Alpha King's requirements were very specific. He wanted someone unmated, educated, and... She paused. Someone who wouldn't come with expectations. Someone who wouldn't come with expectations. Translation. Someone so grateful to be chosen that she wouldn't question anything. Someone disposable enough that her pack wouldn't mourn if things went badly. Someone broken enough to accept whatever scraps of affection or attention she was thrown. I see, I said. Do you? Lydia looked at me intently. I hope so, Evelyn. I genuinely do. Because the most important thing you need to understand is this. The Alpha King always has his reasons. Always. Even when they don't make sense to anyone else. If he chose you, it's because you're exactly what he needs. Your job is to figure out why. The vehicle hummed onward through the darkness, carrying me toward a fate I couldn't escape and couldn't predict. In my bag, pressed between the pages of my favorite book, was a small piece of paper. On it, I'd written 6 words that morning, practicing the shape of them, the weight of them. I refuse to be your bride. 6 words I'd probably never have the courage to say. 6 words that would get me killed if I did. But I'd written them anyway, because even if I was too much of a coward to speak my truth, at least I could acknowledge it existed. At least I could pretend, for a few more hours, that I still had a choice. The capital appeared in the distance. An hour later, lights glittering against the mountainside like fallen stars. And somewhere in that sprawl of power and stone, the Alpha King waited for his bride, waited for me. I pressed my hand against the window, feeling the cold glass beneath my palm, and tried to remember what hope felt like. I couldn't. Chapter 3. The Alpha King's fortress wasn't a castle. It was a claim carved into the mountain itself, a monument to power so absolute it didn't need to announce itself with towers or banners. The stone was dark, almost black, drinking in what little moonlight touched it. Windows glowed like watchful eyes, and as we drove through gates that looked capable of withstanding a siege, I felt the weight of centuries pressing down on me. This was a place where kings were made and unmade, where history had bled into the stone itself, and I was supposed to become its queen. The vehicles stopped in a circular courtyard lit by torches that cast dancing shadows across ancient walls. Lydia exited first, and I followed on unsteady legs. 4 hours of sitting had done nothing to prepare my body for what came next. The ceremony, the wedding night, the moment when the Alpha King would discover exactly how defective his new bride truly was. This way. Lydia's voice was brisk, professional. She led me through a side entrance, away from what I assumed was the main hall. The corridors were wider than they needed to be, the ceilings higher, everything built to accommodate beings larger than human, built for wolves. We passed servants who bowed their heads as Lydia approached, their eyes sliding over me with curiosity and something that might have been pity. None of them were shifters, I could tell by the absence of that particular energy that rolled off pack members. Humans, then. Servants to a kingdom ruled by wolves. Here. Lydia stopped before an ornate door, producing a key from her pocket. Your chambers? You have 1 hour to prepare. Someone will collect you at midnight. She opened the door, revealing a suite that was larger than my family's entire house. The main room held a sitting area arranged around a massive fireplace, bookshelves lining 2 walls, and windows that looked out over the mountain valley. Through an archway, I could see a bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in deep burgundy fabrics. It was beautiful, luxurious, a cage dressed up as a palace. The bathing room is through there. Lydia indicated another door. You'll find everything you need. Your wedding attire has been laid out. If you require assistance, I'll manage. I stepped inside, clutching my bag like a lifeline. Thank you. Lydia studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. Evelyn. A word of advice. From one female to another. I waited. Don't try to be what you think he wants. The Alpha King has survived a century by detecting lies and performance. Just be yourself. Whatever that is, it's what he chose. She left before I could respond, the door closing with a soft click that sounded unnervingly like a cell locking. I stood in the center of the room, my bag still clutched to my chest, and tried to breathe through the panic, clawing up my throat. 1 hour, 60 minutes, until I'd stand before a male I'd never met, and promise him forever, until I'd become his possession, his property, his disappointment when he realized what he'd actually acquired. The bathing room was marble and gold, excessive in its luxury. A tub large enough for 3 people sat beneath a window, already filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender and something else, something wild and green that reminded me of forests. Someone had prepared this for me, anticipated my arrival down to the minute. I stripped off my travel clothes and sank into the water, letting the heat seep into my bones. When was the last time I'd had a bath this nice? Never, probably. At home, we had functional showers and a single tub that 3 families shared. This was decadence I'd never imagined, luxury I'd never wanted because it came with a price I hadn't agreed to pay. I washed quickly, efficiently, refusing to let myself linger, refusing to let the comfort seduce me into forgetting what this really was: a transaction, a trade, a disposal of unwanted goods. The wedding attire laid out in the bedroom made my breath catch. Not white that would have been too presumptuous for someone like me, too much like claiming purity or value I didn't possess. Instead, it was deep midnight blue, almost black, with silver embroidery that caught the light like stars. The fabric was heavy silk, the kind that whispered against skin. Beautiful and somber at once, a mourning dress, disguised as a wedding gown. I put it on carefully, my fingers clumsy with the tiny buttons that ran up the back. The dress fit perfectly, hugging my waist before flowing to the floor in elegant folds. Someone had measured me without my knowledge, taken my dimensions, and crafted this specifically for tonight. The Alpha King's foresight. His control extending even to this. There was a mirror in the corner, and I made myself look. The woman staring back was a stranger, pale and wide-eyed, swallowed by silk and shadows, her dark hair loose around her shoulders because she'd never earned the right to wear it any other way. She looked young and frightened, and utterly out of place in this finery. She looked like a sacrifice dressed for the altar. "I refuse to be your bride," the words whispered through my mind, that secret rebellion I'd written on paper and hidden away. Could I actually say them? When the moment came, when I stood before the Alpha King with witnesses watching, could I actually speak those words aloud? Or would I do what I'd always done, swallow my truth, accept my fate, and pretend that submission was the same as strength? A knock at the door made me jump. "Miss Ivy? It's time." I took one last look at myself in the mirror, memorizing this moment, the last time I'd be Evelyn Ivy, unwanted daughter of a nowhere pack. After tonight, I'd be someone else. Something else. The Alpha King's bride. His possession. His disappointment. I opened the door. The servant waiting was an older woman, human, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. "You look beautiful, dear. Are you ready?" "No." The honesty escaped before I could stop it. "But I don't think that matters." Her smile turned sad. "No, I suppose it doesn't." "Come along then. Best not to keep him waiting." She led me through corridors that seemed to spiral endlessly inward, each one darker than the last, each one taking me deeper into the heart of the fortress. We passed more servants, more guards, wolves this time, their eyes tracking my movement with predatory interest. The Alpha King's people, loyal to him in ways I'd never understand. Finally, we reached a set of double doors carved with scenes I didn't have time to examine. The servant knocked twice, and the doors swung inward, revealing a chamber that stole what little breath I had left. It wasn't a throne room or a grand hall. It was something far more intimate and far more intimidating. A circular chamber lit only by candles, their flames casting writhing shadows on stone walls. At the center stood a raised dais, and on that dais waited 3 figures. A priestess in ceremonial robes, her face serene and ageless, an official in formal attire, holding what looked like a contract. And between them, the Alpha King. I couldn't see his face. He stood in shadow, his back to the candlelight, a silhouette of impossible size and presence. Tall, taller than any wolf I'd ever seen, broad-shouldered and utterly still in the way of predators who didn't need to posture because their danger was absolute. He didn't move as I approached. Didn't speak. Just watched from the darkness as I climbed the steps to the dais on trembling legs, my silk dress whispering secrets with every step. I stopped 3 feet away from him, close enough to see that he wore formal black, close enough to sense the raw power radiating off him like heat, but still too far to make out his features in the shadow. "Evelyn Ivy." The priestess's voice rang out, formal and ancient. "You come before the Alpha King to be joined in matrimony, to become his bride and mate, to bear his heirs and serve his house. Do you come willingly?" This was it. The moment. The question that everything hinged on. I opened my mouth, and the words that had been burning in my throat for days finally clawed their way free. "I refuse." The candles flickered. The shadows deepened. The priestess inhaled sharply, and the official made a strangled sound that might have been shock or horror or both. But the Alpha King, he laughed. Not a kind laugh, not even an amused one. It was dark and low and utterly without warmth, the sound of someone who just witnessed something unexpected and potentially entertaining. He moved then, stepping forward into the candlelight, and I finally saw his face. Beautiful. Devastatingly, cruelly beautiful in the way of things that kill you slowly. Sharp cheekbones and a strong jaw, dark hair that fell to his shoulders, and eyes gods, his eyes, amber and ancient, burning with intelligence and something else, something hungry. He looked 30, maybe 35. But his eyes were older than stone, older than the mountain itself. "You refuse," he repeated, his voice a low rumble that I felt in my bones. "How?" Refreshing. He circled me slowly, predator assessing prey, and I forced myself to stand still, even though every instinct screamed to run. He moved with liquid grace, each step deliberate, and I could feel his gaze traveling over me, cataloging, measuring, judging. "Do you know why you're here, Evelyn Ivy?" he asked from behind me. "Because my father sold me." The truth tasted bitter but honest. "Because I'm disposable enough that losing me wouldn't matter to my pack." He came back around to face me, close now, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, close enough to see the faint scars on his neck, marks that looked like claw wounds that had healed decades ago. "And do you know what happens to wolves who refuse the Alpha King?" My heart hammered against my ribs. "I imagine nothing good." "You imagine correctly." He reached out, and I flinched before I could stop myself. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, displeasure, but he completed the gesture anyway, his fingers catching my chin and tilting my face up to the light. "You're terrified of me." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "Good. Fear is honest." His thumb brushed my jawline, a touch that could have been gentle if it hadn't felt like a brand. "Tell me why you refuse." "Because I don't want this." The words tumbled out, reckless and raw. "I don't want to be your bride, your possession, your—" I choked on the next word, but forced it out anyway. "Your broodmare. I don't want any of this. And yet here you are." He released my chin but didn't step back. "Here you are, dressed in the gown I had made for you, standing in my home, in my territory, surrounded by my people. So tell me, Evelyn Ivy, if you refuse so emphatically, why did you come at all?" "Because I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice." His voice dropped to something almost gentle, almost kind, which somehow made it more terrifying. "You could have run. You could have fought. You could have killed yourself before they put you in that vehicle. But you didn't. You came here. So tell me true why." I met his amber eyes, those ancient predator eyes, and spoke the truth I'd barely admitted to myself. Because dying here seemed more interesting than dying there. Silence. The candles guttered in a wind that didn't exist. The priestess and official stood frozen, probably wondering if they were about to witness an execution. Then the Alpha King smiled. Not the cold smile from before. Something different, something that might have been approval or interest or recognition of something he'd been looking for. "Interesting indeed," he murmured. "Very well, Evelyn Ivy. You refuse to be my bride. I accept your refusal." Relief flooded through me, so sudden and intense I swayed. "However," he continued, and the relief died instantly, "I have a proposal, a different arrangement, if you will." "What arrangement?" I asked warily. "You will stay here, not as my bride, not yet, but as, let's call it a guest. You will have your freedom within the fortress. You may go where you please, do what you like, speak to whom you wish, and every night, at midnight, you will come to my chambers." My blood turned to ice. "Why?" "To answer a riddle." He reached into his jacket and produced a small card, holding it out to me. "If you can answer it correctly, I'll release you. Send you back to your pack with enough gold to buy your freedom from your father. Enough security to build whatever life you want. But if you cannot answer it, then what?" His smile turned predatory. "Then you stay another night, and we try again." I took the card with shaking fingers. Written on it in elegant script was a single question. "What is born of pain, feeds on silence, and dies when spoken?" I read it 3 times, my mind racing. A riddle. He was offering me a way out, a chance at actual freedom, and all I had to do was solve a riddle. Except, riddles weren't simple. Riddles had layers, meanings within meanings. This could take days to solve. Weeks, months, or forever. "What happens?" I asked slowly. "If I refuse this too, then I'll take you back to your pack myself. Tonight. Right now." He gestured to the doors. "You'll go home to your father, to your sister, to that life you were so eager to die escaping, and you'll spend the rest of your days wondering what might have happened if you'd been brave enough to try." It was manipulation. Obvious, blatant manipulation. He was offering me a devil's bargain wrapped in the illusion of choice. But God's help me, it was more choice than I'd had in years. "How long do I have?" I asked. "To solve it." "As long as it takes." He moved back to the shadows, his form blending with the darkness until only his amber eyes were visible. But remember, Evelyn Ivy, every night at midnight, you come to my chambers. Every night, I ask you the riddle. Every night, you try to answer, and every night you fail. He let the sentence hang, unfinished and threatening. Every night I fail? What? I pressed. We get to know each other a little better. His voice drifted from the darkness, velvet and danger combined. After all, if you're going to be my bride eventually, we should at least be acquainted. I won't be your bride. Then solve the riddle. I looked down at the card in my hands, at the elegant words that held my fate in their letters. What is born of pain, feeds on silence, and dies when spoken. I should have said no, should have demanded he take me home immediately, should have run from this trap he was laying out so carefully. But Lydia's words echoed in my mind. Whatever you are, it's what he chose. The Alpha King had chosen someone who wouldn't come with expectations. Someone broken enough to accept scraps. Someone disposable enough that her pack wouldn't mourn. He'd chosen wrong. I wasn't here to be grateful. I wasn't here to accept whatever he offered. And I wasn't going to make this easy for him. I accept your arrangement, I said clearly. One riddle. Every night at midnight. And when I solve it, you let me go. No tricks, no conditions, no last-minute changes to the terms. Agreed. He stepped forward just enough that I could see his smile again. That predatory, pleased smile that made my stomach drop. Then we have a deal, Evelyn Ivy. Welcome to your new home. He turned to the priestess and official. The ceremony is postponed indefinitely. Prepare the western chambers for our guest. She'll need somewhere comfortable to think. Your Majesty, the official started. That will be all. The Alpha King's voice didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It simply carried the weight of absolute authority, and both attendants bowed immediately. Lydia will show you to your new quarters, he said to me. They're far more pleasant than these chambers. You'll find books, writing materials, anything you might need. Consider yourself free to explore the fortress as you wish. And tonight? I asked. At midnight? Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow night. His amber eyes gleamed in the candlelight. Tomorrow night, we begin. He walked past me toward the doors, his presence like a physical force that made the air heavy. But he paused at the threshold, looking back over his shoulder. One more thing, Evelyn Ivy. That courage you showed tonight, refusing me in front of witnesses, speaking your truth even when you were terrified. Keep it. I find it. He searched for the word. Compelling. Then, he was gone, the doors closing behind him, leaving me alone with the priestess and official who both looked at me like I'd sprouted a second head. I looked down at the riddle card again, reading the words that would either free me or trap me here forever. What is born of pain, feeds on silence, and dies when spoken? And for the first time since my father had told me I was being sold, I felt something other than resignation settle into my bones. I felt curious. The Alpha King had wanted a bride who wouldn't come with expectations. Instead, he'd gotten a puzzle he might not know how to solve, and I'd gotten a riddle that just might be my salvation. Tomorrow night at midnight, the real game would begin. I just had to make sure I didn't lose myself in the playing. Hit the like button if you believe Evelyn's courage deserves to be heard, because stories like hers reach those who need them most, but only if we let them. Drop a comment sharing which moment hit closest to home, because your voice might be exactly what another broken soul needs to hear today. Chapter 4. The Nightly Game. The Western Chambers were a different kind of cage, larger, more beautiful, but a cage nonetheless. Lydia delivered me there personally, her expression carefully neutral, as she showed me the suite that would be mine for however long this arrangement lasted. The main room was 3 times the size of my previous quarters, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the mountain valley. Books lined every available wall, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, more than I could read in a lifetime. The Alpha King thought you might appreciate these, Lydia said, gesturing to the shelves. He had them brought from the Royal Library this afternoon. This afternoon, before I'd even arrived, before I'd refused him, he'd already known, somehow, that I'd need them. How did he know I read? I asked. Lydia's lips curved slightly. The Alpha King makes it his business to know everything about those who enter his territory. Your father mentioned your hobby. Books, stories, spending hours lost in fiction rather than facing reality. His words, not mine. Of course. My father had probably offered that information as another mark against me, the strange daughter who preferred made-up worlds to real life, who couldn't even properly exist in the present. He'd meant it as a flaw. The Alpha King had turned it into a gift. The bathing room is through there, Lydia continued, moving through the space with efficient familiarity. Fresh clothes in the wardrobe, we had them prepared in your size. Meals will be delivered at regular intervals, unless you prefer to dine in the main hall with the court. I don't. The thought of sitting among the Alpha King's people, being stared at and judged, made my skin crawl. Understandable. Then your meals will come here. She paused at the door, studying me with those calculating eyes. You surprised him tonight. That doesn't happen often. Is that good or bad? I genuinely don't know. She tilted her head. But it's interesting, and the Alpha King values interesting far more than he values compliant. Remember that. She left, and I was alone in my beautiful prison. I spent that first night exploring the books, running my fingers over spines that held stories from every corner of the territories and beyond. Philosophy, history, poetry, fiction. The collection was curated, thoughtful. Someone had chosen these specifically, selecting titles that would appeal to a particular kind of mind, my kind of mind. At midnight, I half expected a summons to the Alpha King's chambers, despite his promise that tonight I'd rest. But no one came. The fortress settled into quiet around me, and eventually, I collapsed into the massive bed, still wearing the midnight blue wedding dress because I was too exhausted to change. I dreamed of amber eyes and riddles written in smoke. The next day passed in strange suspension. Meals appeared at regular intervals, far more food than I could eat, beautifully prepared. I tried to read, to distract myself, but the riddle cards sat on the table beside me, demanding attention. What is born of pain, feeds on silence, and dies when spoken? A secret? No. Secrets weren't born of pain necessarily. Shame? Closer. But shame didn't die when spoken, sometimes it grew louder. Grief? Maybe. But grief could persist even after being voiced. I turned the question over in my mind all day, worrying at it like a wolf with a bone. The Alpha King had chosen this riddle specifically. It meant something. But what? At 1:45, I changed into one of the dresses from the wardrobe. Simple, dark green, modest and practical. I brushed my hair until it shone, not because I wanted to look appealing, but because I needed something to do with my shaking hands. At midnight exactly, there was a knock at my door. A servant stood in the corridor, young and human, her eyes downcast. Miss Ivy, His Majesty requests your presence. Lead the way. She took me deeper into the fortress, through corridors I hadn't seen yesterday, past rooms that hummed with power and purpose. Finally, we reached a set of carved doors that seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't name. The servant knocked once, and a voice from within called, "Enter." She opened the door but didn't follow me inside. I stepped through alone, and the door closed at my back with ominous finality. The Alpha King's private chambers were nothing like I'd expected. No throne, no ostentatious displays of wealth or power. Instead, it felt almost comfortable. A large fireplace dominated one wall, flames crackling cheerfully. Bookshelves lined another wall, as many as in my own chambers. Comfortable chairs arranged near the fire. Large windows showing the night sky, and in one of those chairs, reading a book with the firelight painting gold across his features, sat the Alpha King. He looked up as I entered, and even though I'd seen him last night, the impact of his presence still stole my breath. Beautiful and terrible at once, human-shaped but utterly other. Evelyn Ivy. He closed the book, setting it aside. Punctual. I appreciate that. You commanded my presence at midnight. It would be foolish to be late. Commanded. He tasted the word like wine. Is that how you see this arrangement? As commands you must obey? Isn't that what they are? No. He stood, moving with that liquid grace that reminded me he was a predator wearing a man's skin. They're invitations you've chosen to accept. You can refuse at any time. Walk out that door, Go back to your chambers, and I won't stop you. But then I wouldn't get to solve the riddle. Precisely. He gestured to the chair opposite his. Sit, please. I moved carefully, hyper-aware of him tracking my every step. The chair was soft, comfortable. The fire's warmth seeped into my bones, easing tension I didn't realize I was carrying. Wine? He offered, gesturing to a decanter on the side table. No. Thank you. Wise. Keep your wits sharp. He settled back into his own chair, entirely at ease while I perched on the edge of mine like a bird ready to flee. So, have you thought about the riddle? All day. And? I pulled the card from my pocket, reading the words again even though I'd memorized them hours ago. I have theories, but no answer I'm confident in. Tell me your theories. He leaned forward slightly, those amber eyes focused entirely on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I'm curious how your mind works. It felt like a trap. Like anything I said would reveal too much, give him weapons to use against me later. But I'd accepted this arrangement, and backing down now would only prove I was afraid. A secret, I said. Born from pain, something we want to hide because it hurts. Feeds on silence, grows stronger the more we keep it locked inside. Dies when spoken, loses its power once we voice it. His expression gave nothing away. Logical, but incorrect. Disappointment settled heavy in my chest, though I'd expected it. Then what about shame? It follows the same pattern. Also logical, also incorrect. He tilted his head, studying me. You're thinking too literally. The riddle isn't about emotions alone. It's about something more fundamental. Try again. I don't have another answer tonight. Then let's talk about something else. He settled back in his chair, picking up his wine glass. Tell me about these stories you tell yourself. Your father mentioned you're quite skilled at escaping into fiction. Heat crawled up my neck. He made it sound like a weakness. Perhaps to him it was. But I'm not your father. His voice held an edge I couldn't identify. I asked what stories you tell, Evelyn Ivy. Not whether telling them makes you weak. I studied him warily, looking for the trap in the question. His expression remained open, genuinely curious, as if my answer actually mattered to him. I used to make up fairy tales, I said finally. When I was younger, stories where broken girls became something more, where being different wasn't the same as being worthless. Used to. I got older, realized that fairy tales lie. There's no magic that fixes what's wrong with you. No prince who sees past your flaws to the worthy person underneath. In real life, broken stays broken. Does it? He swirled his wine thoughtfully. Or do we simply decide that some breaks are flaws rather than features? That sounds like something someone who isn't broken would say. His laugh was low and unexpected. Oh, Evelyn Ivy, you have no idea how broken I am. The way he said it with absolute certainty, without self-pity or drama, made me look at him differently, made me see past the power and beauty to something underneath, something that ached with familiar pain. Tell me a story now, he said suddenly. One of your fairy tales. I want to hear how you see the world. Why? Because you're in my home, sitting by my fire, trying to solve my riddle. The least you can do is entertain me while you fail. But his smile took the sting from the words, made them almost playful. I shouldn't have. Should have refused, should have kept that part of myself private and protected. But something about sitting in this comfortable room, with firelight dancing and his amber eyes watching me with genuine interest, made the words spill out. Once there was a girl born without wings, I began, my voice soft and hesitant. In a kingdom where everyone could fly, she walked. The other children pitied her at first, tried to teach her, tried to fix her, but eventually, they just forgot about her, left her on the ground while they soared above. I paused, expecting him to interrupt or mock, but he simply nodded, listening with complete attention. The girl learned to love the ground. She studied the flowers no one else bothered to see, learned the names of stones and roots and growing things. She told herself she was happy in her different life, and maybe she was, sometimes. But at night, she'd dream of flying, of finally being whole. How does it end? he asked quietly. It doesn't. That's where I always stopped. I met his eyes, because I never knew if she should get her wings, if that would fix everything, or if she should learn that the ground has its own kind of beauty. I could never decide which ending was more honest. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken things. The fire crackled, wind whispered against the windows, and the Alpha King looked at me like I'd just said something profound, instead of revealing how pathetically I'd tried to make sense of my own inadequacy. I think, he said finally, that the story isn't about whether she gets wings or learns to love the ground. It's about whether anyone bothers to walk beside her while she figures it out. Something in my chest cracked open, not painfully, but like a door I'd kept locked finally admitting light. Tell me another one, he said. Tomorrow night, when you come back to try the riddle again. What if I solve it tomorrow? What if I don't come back? His smile was sharp and knowing. Then I'll be disappointed to lose such an excellent storyteller. But somehow, I don't think that's going to happen, do you? He was right, and we both knew it. The riddle wouldn't be solved in a day, maybe not in a week. This would take time. And every night, I'd return here, to this room, to him. Our time is up, he said, standing. Midnight to 1, that's our hour. I won't keep you longer tonight. I stood as well, surprised that an hour had passed so quickly, surprised that I wasn't eager to leave, that some part of me wanted to stay and hear what else he might say, what other secrets might slip out in this comfortable darkness. Same time tomorrow? I asked. Same time, every night. Until you solve the riddle, or... He trailed off, leaving the alternative unspoken. Or what? He moved closer, close enough that I could see the exact shade of his amber eyes, gold and whiskey and ancient fire. Or until you decide that solving it isn't what you actually want. That's not going to happen. We'll see. He reached out slowly, telegraphing the movement so I could pull back if I wanted. When I didn't, his fingers brushed a strand of hair back from my face, the touch feather-light and somehow devastating. Sleep well, Evelyn Ivy. Dream of riddles and broken girls, and all the stories you've never told. I left before I could do something stupid like ask what he meant, like request to stay longer, like admit that for the first time since arriving, I felt something other than fear. I felt seen. The pattern established itself over the next week. Days spent in my chambers, reading and thinking and turning the riddle over in my mind. Nights spent in his chambers, offering answers that were always wrong, always close but never quite right. And then, after I'd failed, we'd talk. He'd ask about my stories, and I'd tell him fragments of the fairy tales I'd made up as a child. He'd listen with complete attention, asking questions that showed he actually cared about the answers. Sometimes he'd share his own observations, cryptic comments about the nature of power or loneliness or time. Power, he said on the third night, isn't about strength. It's about the willingness to make choices everyone else is too afraid to make. Is that how you became Alpha King? I asked. By making terrible choices? No. I became Alpha King by being the last one standing after everyone else made terrible choices. His smile was dark. I just happened to be better at surviving the consequences. On the 5th night, he asked about Derek the mate who'd rejected me. How did you know about that? I demanded, embarrassed heat flooding my cheeks. Your father mentioned it. He seemed to think it was relevant to explaining why you'd be grateful for any attention. The Alpha King's expression hardened. He was wrong, obviously. But I'm curious, did you love him? I thought I did. When I was younger, more foolish. And now? Now I think I loved the idea of being chosen, of being worth something to someone. I stared into the fire, watching flames consume wood. Turns out I wasn't worth enough. He was an idiot. The certainty in his voice made me look up. A coward and an idiot who chose safely over substance. You're better off without him. You don't know me well enough to make that judgment, don't I? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, those amber eyes pinning me in place. I know you're intelligent. You've come closer to solving the riddle than anyone else I've posed it to. I know you're brave. You refused a king to his face. I know you're creative. Your stories reveal a mind that sees possibilities others miss. And I know you're honest to a fault, even when lying would serve you better. So yes, Evelyn Ivy. I think I know you well enough to say with absolute certainty that any male who rejected you is a fool. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. No one had ever spoken to me like that, like I was something valuable, something worth keeping. Why do you care? I whispered. About any of this? I'm just what? Just a disposable daughter? Just a broken wolf who can't shift? His voice turned sharp. Is that how you see yourself? It's how everyone sees me. I don't. He stood, moved to the window, his back to me. I see someone fighting to survive in a world that told her she was worthless. Someone who learned to tell stories because reality was too painful. Someone who chose to die interesting rather than die safe. That's not broken, Evelyn. That's extraordinary. The word hung between us, impossible and intoxicating. Extraordinary. Me. I should go, I said, standing on unsteady legs. It's past our hour. Yes. But he didn't turn around, didn't watch me leave. Same time tomorrow. Same time. I fled before I could do something irreversible like believe him. Like let his words settle into the wounded places inside me and start to heal things that were better left broken. Because if I healed, if I let myself hope, the inevitable disappointment would destroy me completely. Better to stay broken. Safer. But that night, curled in my bed with moonlight streaming through the windows, I caught myself whispering his words like a prayer. Extraordinary. Not broken. Worth something. And for the first time in years, I almost believed them. Chapter 5. The Gift and the Truth. 2 weeks into our nightly meetings, the Alpha King gave me a gift. I arrived at midnight as usual, expecting the familiar routine, the riddle attempt, the inevitable failure, the conversation that followed like a reward for my persistence. But when I entered his chambers, he wasn't sitting by the fire. He stood by the window, silhouetted against the night sky, and something about his posture, tense, uncertain, made my steps falter. Evelyn. He turned, and I saw he held something in his hands. A key. Old iron, ornate, the kind that opened doors meant to stay locked. Before we attempt the riddle tonight, I want to show you something. What is it? A gift. Or perhaps a bribe. I haven't decided which. His smile was self-deprecating in a way I'd never seen from him. Come. He led me from his chambers, down corridors I'd explored during my daytime wanderings, then through a door I'd never noticed hidden behind a tapestry, accessible only to those who knew it existed. The passage beyond was narrow, lit by torches that burned with an unnatural blue flame. Where are we going? I asked. Somewhere I haven't shown anyone in 30 years. His voice echoed strangely in the confined space. Somewhere I think you'll appreciate. The passage opened into a room that stole the breath from my lungs. A library. But not like the collections in my chambers or his, this was something else entirely. The room was circular, 3 stories tall, with a domed glass ceiling that showed the stars. Bookshelves spiraled upward in a dizzying array, connected by staircases and walkways that defied conventional architecture. Thousands upon thousands of books, manuscripts, scrolls, knowledge accumulated over centuries. And in the center, a reading area with comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and a small table that held ink and fresh parchment. This was built by the first Alpha King, he said quietly, watching my face as I took it all in. 400 years ago, he believed that power without knowledge was just violence with a crown. Every king since has added to the collection. These are books you won't find anywhere else, histories written by those who lived them, philosophies banned by other kingdoms, stories that were too dangerous or too true to share widely. I moved forward as if in a dream, running my fingers along spines that whispered with age and significance. Poetry from before the Great Division. Medical texts written by healers long dead. Fairy tales in languages I didn't recognize, illustrated with breathtaking detail. Why? I turned to face him, this impossible male who'd given me something I didn't know I needed. Why show me this? He moved closer, the key still in his hand. Because in 2 weeks of conversation, you've mentioned at least 40 different books. You remember authors, specific passages, the way certain stories made you feel. You don't just read, Evelyn. You devour. You metabolize. You make knowledge part of yourself. He held out the key. This library deserves someone who will love it properly. And you deserve a place where your mind can be free, even if the rest of you is trapped here. I stared at the key, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering. Access to this place, this treasure trove of everything I'd ever wanted, the freedom to spend my days here, lost in worlds and words and wonder. I don't understand you, I whispered. You want a bride, an heir, someone to continue your bloodline. But everything you've done since I arrived, the riddle, the conversations, none of it serves that purpose. What do you actually want from me? Something flickered across his face. Vulnerability, maybe, or recognition of a truth he hadn't wanted to voice. I don't know anymore. The admission hung between us, honest and devastating. When I sent for a bride, he continued, I wanted what every king wants, an alliance strengthened through marriage, an heir to secure the succession, a female who wouldn't complicate my life with expectations or emotions. Your father's reports made you sound perfect for that. Forgettable, grateful, someone who'd take what I offered and ask for nothing more. But I'm not that. I said it without pride or shame, just fact. No, you're not. He moved to one of the chairs, sinking into it like the weight of centuries had finally caught up with him. You're infuriating and brilliant and damaged in ways that mirror my own damage. You tell stories that break my heart. You solve riddles that aren't meant to be solved. And every night when you leave, I find myself counting the hours until midnight, until I can see you again and hear what you'll say next. My heart hammered against my ribs. That sounds like I'm falling in love with you? His laugh was bitter. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm just lonely enough to mistake intellectual companionship for something more. Either way, it's not what I intended. Not what I wanted. Then let me go. The words hurt to say, but I forced them out. Declare the riddle unsolvable. Send me away with the gold you promised. We can both move on. I can't. He met my eyes, and what I saw there made my breath catch. Hunger and longing and something that looked dangerously like hope. Because you haven't solved it yet. And until you do, you're bound by our agreement to return here every night. To sit with me. To let me pretend, for 1 hour, that I'm not alone in this fortress. That someone sees me as more than just power and punishment. I do see you, I said before I could stop myself. I see someone who's survived when he should have died. Someone who's kept his humanity despite having every reason to lose it. Someone who's lonely in a way that has nothing to do with being alone. He stood abruptly, moving to the window, his back to me again, his tell, I'd learned, for when emotions ran too close to the surface. You should take the key. Explore. This place is yours now, to use as you wish. And Evelyn? Yes. The riddle. Keep trying. Because the day you solve it, the day you're free to leave. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. I think that might break something in me that's already fractured beyond repair, but I'll let you go anyway, because I gave my word, and because you deserve the choice I never had. I wanted to ask what choice he meant. Wanted to cross the room and touch him, comfort him, tell him that maybe being broken together was better than being whole alone, but I didn't. Because I was still terrified of what I was beginning to feel, this pull toward him that had nothing to do with fear or duty, and everything to do with recognition. Like, calling, to like, damage, seeing damage and whispering, I understand. Thank you, I said instead, clutching the key like a lifeline. For this, for trusting me with it. Don't thank me yet. He still didn't turn around. You haven't tried tonight's riddle. And I'm beginning to suspect you're getting close to the answer. I pulled out the card, reading the familiar words that had haunted me for 2 weeks. What is born of pain, feeds on silence, and dies when spoken. And suddenly, standing in this library, full of stories, listening to the Alpha King admit he was lonely, I understood. A lie, I said softly. The answer is a lie. He turned, and the expression on his face confirmed it even before he spoke. Pride and sorrow mixed together, painted across features that had become heartbreakingly familiar. Explain, he said. A lie is born of pain. We lie to avoid hurting others, or being hurt ourselves. It feeds on silence, grows stronger the more we refuse to speak the truth. and it dies when spoken. When we finally voice what's real, the lie can't survive. I met his amber eyes. The answer is a lie. Yes. The single word carried the weight of endings. You solved it, Evelyn Ivy. You're free. I should have felt relief, joy, triumph at having earned my freedom after 2 weeks of nightly attempts. Instead, I felt loss opening up beneath me like a chasm. When do I leave? My voice sounded hollow. Whenever you wish. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. I'll arrange for the gold, for transportation, for letters of reference that will allow you to settle anywhere in the territories. You can build whatever life you want. You've earned it. And if I don't want to leave? The question escaped before I could trap it, reckless and revealing. His eyes widened slightly, hope flickering to life before he ruthlessly crushed it. Don't, he said roughly. Don't stay out of pity or obligation, or some misguided sense that you owe me anything. I won't be your next cage, Evelyn. You deserve freedom, and I won't take that from you just because I'm selfish enough to want you to stay. That's not why I'd stay. Then why? He closed the distance between us in 3 strides, catching my shoulders, amber eyes burning into mine. Tell me why you'd give up freedom to remain here. Tell me the truth. The truth. The thing that lies died for. The thing I'd been avoiding since the first night I'd sat by his fire and realized he saw me as something more than broken. Because when I'm with you, I don't feel worthless, I admitted, the words tearing free like confession. Because you listen to my stories like they matter. Because you're lonely and I'm lonely, and somehow that makes both of us less alone. Because I stopped, terrified of the next words, of voicing the feeling that had been growing in my chest like wildfire. Because you what? His hands tightened on my shoulders, desperate and careful at once. Because I think I'm falling in love with you, I whispered, and that terrifies me more than anything else ever has. For a moment, he just stared at me. Then he pulled me against him, his arms coming around me like shelter, like sanctuary, like home. I felt his heartbeat against my cheek too fast, mirroring my own racing pulse. I've been in love with you since the 3rd night, he said into my hair. When you told me that story about the girl without wings, when I realized you were telling me your pain disguised as fiction, trusting me with your damage. I knew then that I'd found something I didn't know I'd been looking for. I pulled back just enough to see his face. But the riddle was my cowardice. His smile was self-deprecating. I thought if I gave you a way out, if I made you work for your freedom, then when you left, it wouldn't hurt as much. I'd tell myself you chose to go, that I'd done the honorable thing by letting you. But the truth? His thumb brushed my cheek, wiping away tears I didn't know I'd shed. The truth is, I've been praying every night that you wouldn't solve it. That you'd stay trapped in our agreement forever, coming to my chambers at midnight, letting me pretend I deserved your company. You do deserve it, I said fiercely. Whatever you think you've done, whatever you believe makes you unworthy, you're wrong. You've been kinder to me in 2 weeks than anyone was in my entire life before this. Evelyn. My name was a prayer on his lips. If you stay, it can't be like this. I won't keep you in beautiful rooms and stolen hours. I want. He stopped, struggling with words. I want what I was too afraid to ask for before. I want you as my bride, my mate, my equal. I want to build a life with you, not just count down nights until you leave me, but I can't give you an heir. The words tasted like ash. I'm barren. The healers were very clear about that. If you take me as your mate, you'll never have children. Your line will end with you. Then it ends. He said it like it was simple, like he wasn't sacrificing centuries of tradition and expectation. I've lived 147 years, Evelyn. I've had countless opportunities to produce heirs, and I never cared enough to bother. Do you know why? I shook my head, afraid to hope, because until I met you, I couldn't imagine wanting to build a future at all. The years just stretched ahead, endless and gray. But now, his hands cupped my face, tilting it up so I had to meet his eyes. Now I can imagine decades with you. Centuries, if we're lucky. I can imagine growing old together, filling this fortress with your books and my late-night conversations, and all the stories we'll create together. Children would be a gift, yes, but you are already everything I need. You barely know me, I protested weakly. I know that you're brave and broken and beautiful. I know that your mind is a wonder, and your heart is resilient, despite every attempt to crush it. I know that 2 weeks ago, I was waiting to die, counting down years like a prisoner marking days. And now I'm counting hours until midnight, until I see you again, until I get to discover another layer of who you are. He pressed his forehead to mine. That's enough. That's more than I ever dreamed of having. I'm still afraid, I whispered. Afraid that this is a story I'm telling myself. That I'll wake up and you'll realize I'm not worth it. Then let me tell you a different story. His voice was soft, intimate, for me alone. Once there was a king who lived in a mountain fortress, alone except for servants and subjects who feared him. He'd survived so long by not letting anyone close, by keeping his heart locked away where it couldn't be damaged. And then one night, a girl arrived who didn't want him, who refused him, who told him the truth, even when it should have gotten her killed. And for the first time in decades, the king remembered what it felt like to be human, to want something beyond mere survival, to hope. How does it end? I asked, echoing the question he'd posed to me weeks ago. That depends. His lips quirked. Will you marry me, Evelyn Ivy? Not because you're trapped, not because you owe me, but because you want to? Because you love me as much as I love you? Because together, we might be able to build something neither of us could create alone? I thought about my father, who'd seen me as disposable. About Derek, who'd rejected me publicly. About every person who'd ever made me feel like being broken meant being worthless. And then I thought about the male holding me now who'd given me a library, who'd listened to my stories, who'd valued my mind over my ability to produce heirs, who'd fallen in love with my damage instead of trying to fix it. Yes, I said, and felt something inside me finally settle into place. Yes, I'll marry you. Not because I'm trapped. Because I'm choosing you. Because you make me feel like being broken might actually be perfect, as long as I'm broken with you. He kissed me then, and it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been, gentle and fierce at once, careful and desperate, a promise sealed in touch. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, his smile was luminous. We should probably have an actual ceremony this time, he said, with witnesses who don't think you're about to be executed. Probably. I laughed, giddy with joy and relief, and the sheer impossibility of this moment. Though I prefer our first attempt. At least that one was memorable. Memorable. He pulled me close again, tucking me against his chest. Evelyn, you've been memorable since the moment you walked into that chamber and looked me in the eye while refusing to be my bride. Everything since then has just been me falling deeper. Everything. We stood there in the library he'd given me, surrounded by centuries of stories, and wrote a new beginning to our own. Later, much later, as I prepared to return to my chambers, he caught my hand. Evelyn, that story you told me, about the girl without wings, what about it? I think I know the ending now. His amber eyes were warm, steady, for home. She realizes that the boy who chooses to walk beside her has wings he never uses, because flying alone isn't nearly as meaningful as walking together. And finally, after 24 years of feeling worthless, I understood what it meant to be chosen, not despite my damage, because of it. Chapter 6. The Shattered Illusion. We were married 3 days later in the same chamber where I'd first refused him, but this time everything was different. This time, when the priestess asked if I came willingly, I said yes with my whole heart. This time, when the Alpha King took my hand, it felt like choosing rather than surrendering. This time, I wasn't a sacrifice, I was a bride. The ceremony was small, intimate, just as he'd promised that first night. Lydia stood as witness, along with James and Victor. The priestess spoke the ancient words that bound us, and when she declared us mated, the Alpha King, my husband now, my mate kissed me like I was precious, like I was worth keeping. Queen Evelyn, he murmured against my lips. How does it feel? Terrifying, I admitted. And perfect. He laughed. that warm sound I'd come to crave, and pulled me closer. Get used to it. You're stuck with me now. I think I can manage that. We spent that night in his chambers, our chambers now talking until dawn. Not about duty or heirs or politics, but about everything else. About the books we loved, the places we wanted to visit, the life we'd build together. He told me about his childhood, about becoming Alpha King at 23 when his father fell in battle, about the crushing weight of power and the loneliness that came with it. I thought I'd gotten used to it, he said, his fingers tangling with mine as we lay together in his massive bed. The isolation, the distance everyone maintains out of fear or respect. But then you arrived and reminded me what connection felt like, what it meant to be seen as something other than a crown. You're more than a crown, I said softly. You're Stephen. He'd told me his name the night I'd solved the riddle, the name only his closest advisors used, the name that belonged to the male beneath the title. Hearing me say it made him smile every time. Say it again, he requested, pulling me closer. Stephen. I pressed a kiss to his jaw. My mate. My king. My husband. You're everything, he corrected, as you are mine. I believed him. God's help me. I believed every word. The next 2 weeks were the happiest of my life. I spent my days in the library Stephen had given me, losing myself in centuries of accumulated knowledge. I read histories and philosophies, poetry that made me weep, and stories that made me laugh. Sometimes Stephen would join me, bringing work he needed to complete, and we'd sit in comfortable silence, him reviewing reports and correspondence while I devoured book after book. Other times, he'd pull me away from my reading to show me parts of the fortress I hadn't seen. The training grounds where his warriors practiced. The council chambers where laws were debated. The gardens carved into the mountainside. Impossible and beautiful. This was my mother's place, he told me as we walked through rows of night-blooming flowers. She died when I was 15. Battle wound that festered. But she made these gardens, brought plants from every corner of the territories. She said that even warriors needed beauty. She sounds remarkable. She was. His expression turned distant, remembering. She would have liked you. She valued intelligence over everything else. Always said that a sharp mind was more dangerous than sharp claws. Is that why you valued my mind? I teased gently. Because your mother taught you to? No. He stopped, turning to face me in the moonlight. I value your mind because it challenges me. Because you see connections I miss. Ask questions I never thought to ask. Because talking to you is the most stimulating thing I've done in decades. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. My mother would have loved that about you, but I love it for my own reasons. Every night, we returned to his chambers, our chambers, and talked until exhaustion claimed us. He'd ask about my stories, and I'd spin new fairy tales for him, each one a little less dark than the last. Because I was happy now. Because the broken girl in my stories was finding her way toward healing, toward hope, toward home. Tell me about the girl without wings, he requested one night. How does her story end now that you know? I thought about it, curled against his side with his arm around me, safe and warm and chosen. She meets a boy who can fly, I said softly. But instead of flying away and leaving her behind, he stays on the ground with her. He shows her all the beautiful things she'd missed while dreaming of the sky, the flowers, the stones, the growing things. And gradually, she realizes that she'd been so focused on what she couldn't do that she'd never appreciated what she could. And the boy realizes that flying alone had always felt hollow, but walking beside her feels like soaring. And then? His voice was quiet, intimate in the darkness. And then they build a life on the ground together. Not because either of them is broken, but because they choose each other. Because love isn't about fixing what's wrong, it's about accepting what is, and deciding that's enough. That's a good ending, he murmured. Much better than the original. The original didn't have you in it. He kissed me then, slow and sweet, and I thought that this warmth, this safety, this absolute certainty that I was loved, was better than any fairy tale I'd ever imagined. I should have known it wouldn't last. It happened on a Tuesday morning, exactly 17 days after our wedding. I was in the library, reading a collection of ancient poetry, when Lydia appeared in the doorway. Her expression was carefully neutral, but something in her eyes made my stomach drop. "Evelyn, may I speak with you?" "Of course." I set down my book, noting the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, exactly, it's just..." She moved into the room, her movements precise and controlled. "I need to tell you something. About the Alpha King. About Stephen." My heart started hammering. "Is he hurt? Is something..." "He's fine. Physically." She sat in the chair across from me, her hands folded in her lap. "But there's something you need to know. Something he should have told you himself. But I suspect he was waiting for the right moment. Or perhaps he was hoping he'd never have to tell you at all." "Closo, tell me what..." Lydia took a deep breath. "Stephen is cursed." The word hung between us, impossible and terrifying. "What?" 73 years ago, he angered a witch. The details don't matter, it was political, a territory dispute that went badly, but the witch cursed him before she died. Lydia's voice was steady, factual, but I could see the sympathy in her eyes. "The curse prevents him from finding true love as himself. Any female who loves him in his human form breaks the curse. But if she discovers his true nature before loving him completely, the curse resets. He has to start over." My mind raced, trying to process what she was saying. His true nature? He's a wolf shifter. I knew that. "No, Evelyn." Lydia's voice was gentle. "He's not just a wolf. The curse transformed him into something else. Something monstrous. Every night, from midnight to dawn, he becomes a beast. Not a wolf, something far worse. And he's been hiding it from you since you arrived." The room spun. All those nights we'd spent together, talking until exhaustion claimed me, but never past midnight. Never into the early morning hours. He'd always made sure I left before midnight struck. Always found reasons why I needed to return to my chambers even after we were married. "That's why our chambers are separate," I said slowly, understanding dawning like horror. "Why he always insists I sleep in the western wing. Because at midnight, he transforms." "Yes." Lydia looked pained. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I thought you knew. I thought he'd told you before the wedding, but when I realized you had no idea, that he was still hiding it from you." She leaned forward. "You have a right to know what you've bound yourself to. Does everyone know?" My voice sounded hollow. "Is the entire fortress aware that I'm the fool who married someone without knowing the truth?" "Only the innermost circle. Stephen is very careful about who has access to information about his curse. But yes, we all know. We've all seen what he becomes." "Show me." The words emerged flat, emotionless. "I want to see. Evelyn, I don't think. Show me what my husband really is." I stood, suddenly needing to move. To do something other than sit and absorb the fact that everything, every conversation, every tender moment, every promise had been built on a lie. "Please." Lydia hesitated, then nodded. "Tonight. Come to the East Tower at 1:45. There's a viewing chamber one-way glass. You'll be able to see him transform without him knowing you're there." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Why tell me at all?" "Because you deserve the truth." She met my eyes, and what I saw there was genuine concern. "And because I've watched Stephen try to break this curse for 73 years. I've seen him fall in love before, seen females flee in terror when they discovered what he was. I thought maybe this time would be different. But if he's hiding it from you, if he's built your entire relationship on concealing his true nature..." She shook her head. "That's not love. That's deception. And you deserve better." She left, and I stood alone in the library that had been his gift to me, the beautiful cage meant to keep me distracted while he hid the truth. What is born of pain, feeds on silence and dies when spoken. A lie. The riddle had been about his curse all along. A confession disguised as a game, and I'd solved it, had spoken the answer aloud, but the lie hadn't died. It had just grown stronger, fed by his silence, nurtured by my ignorance. I thought about the last 17 days. The happiness I'd felt, the certainty that I'd finally found someone who loved me for who I was. The stories I'd told him, the secrets I'd shared, the way I'd opened my damaged heart and let him inside. All of it built on a foundation of lies. Don't try to be what you think he wants. Lydia had told me that first night. Just be yourself. But Stephen hadn't extended me the same courtesy. He'd hidden what he was, had made sure I fell in love with a carefully curated version of himself. The brilliant, lonely king who valued my mind and saw past my flaws. Who was the beast he became at midnight? What did he look like? What did he do during those hours when he made sure I was safely locked away in my separate chambers? I had to know, even if the knowledge destroyed me. At 1:45, I made my way to the East Tower. Lydia waited for me outside a heavy door, her expression grave. "Are you certain about this?" she asked. "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She opened the door, revealing a small chamber with a single window. Not glass, something else. Something that shimmered faintly in the torchlight. "Spelled glass," Lydia explained. "He can't see through it, can't hear us, but we can see and hear everything in his chambers." She paused. "It was created for security purposes, to make sure the beast couldn't escape and harm anyone during his transformation." "Has he," I asked, "harmed anyone?" "Not in decades. He's learned to control himself, but in the early years of the curse." She trailed off, and I didn't need her to finish. I understood. The beast was dangerous, and I'd married him without knowing he existed. Through the spelled glass, I could see Stephen's private chambers different from the comfortable room where we'd spent our evenings. This was starker, harder. Stone walls without decoration, heavy chains mounted to the floor, currently unused. A space designed for containment, not comfort. Stephen stood in the center of the room, his back to us. He wore simple clothes, dark pants, no shirt. As I watched, he rolled his shoulders, stretched his neck, preparing for something. "It's almost midnight," Lydia murmured beside me. I held my breath, waiting. The transformation began with a sound, bones cracking, restructuring. Stephen dropped to his knees, a growl tearing from his throat. His body convulsed, muscles rippling beneath skin that was suddenly covered in dark fur. His spine arched impossibly, limbs lengthening, hands becoming claws. And then he rose, and I saw what my husband truly was. Not a wolf, not anything close to natural. A beast at least 8 feet tall, covered in midnight black fur, with eyes that burned gold in the darkness. His face was a nightmare fusion of wolf and something prehistoric, something that should have been extinct. Fangs longer than my fingers, claws that could rip through stone. He was magnificent. He was terrifying. He was the monster my husband became every night, while I slept safely unaware. The beast that was Stephen moved through the room with surprising grace, testing his form. Then he did something that made my heart crack. He moved to a shelf and pulled down a book. My book. The poetry collection I'd been reading that morning. With claws that should have shredded the pages, he carefully, gently opened it and began to read. "He does that every night," Lydia said softly. "Reads the books you've been reading during the day. It's the only way he can feel close to you during the transformation." I watched through the spelled glass as Stephen read my poetry with devastating care. Watched him turn pages with precision that shouldn't have been possible for those massive claws. Watched him pause at passages I'd marked, lingering over the words that had moved me. And I understood with sudden, crushing clarity. He hadn't hidden this from me out of malice or manipulation. He'd hidden it because he was terrified I'd do exactly what I was doing now. Stand on the other side of spelled glass and see him as a monster. "I've seen enough," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "Evelyn, thank you for showing me. But I need to go." I left before Lydia could respond, before I could second-guess what I was about to do. Because loving someone meant seeing all of them, even the parts they were afraid to show. And I wasn't about to let fear make a liar out of me. Chapter 7. The Choice in Darkness. I didn't go back to my chambers. Instead, I returned to the library, the one Stephen had given me. The place where I'd told him I was falling in love with him. I sat in the chair where we'd spent so many evenings together, and I thought about lies. The riddle had been about lies, born of pain, fed by silence, dying when spoken. Stephen's lie had been born of pain, the agony of 73 years trapped in a curse, watching females flee in terror when they saw what he became. It had fed on his silence, growing stronger with every conversation where he'd chosen not to tell me the truth. And now that I knew, now that the silence was broken, what would happen to the lie? Would it die, like the riddle promised? Or would it kill what we'd built together? I stayed in the library until dawn broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Through the windows, I watched the world wake up, and I tried to make sense of the tangled mess of emotions choking me. Betrayal, yes, that was there. The sharp sting of discovering he'd hidden something so fundamental about himself. Fear, absolutely. Because the beast I'd seen was genuinely terrifying, powerful enough to kill me without effort if he chose. But underneath those expected reactions, something else pulsed steady and strong. Understanding, because I knew what it was like to hide the broken parts of yourself. I'd spent 24 years pretending I was fine with being the daughter no one wanted, the wolf who couldn't shift, the female declared worthless by her own mate. I'd hidden my pain behind stories and silence, had learned to lie about my worth because the truth was too devastating to voice. Stephen had done the same thing. He'd hidden his beast behind careful timing and separate chambers, had learned to lie through omission because the truth had driven away everyone who'd mattered before me. We were both liars, both broken, both terrified that being fully seen would mean being rejected. The difference was that I'd been truly seen by him. He'd looked at my damage and called it extraordinary. He'd valued my mind, my stories, my fractured heart, and hadn't flinched from any of it. Could I do the same for him? Could I look at the beast and see the male I loved? Or would fear win? I didn't know. But I owed it to both of us to try. Stephen found me in the library around mid-morning. He looked tired, dark circles under his amber eyes, his hair disheveled like he'd been running his hands through it. He stopped in the doorway when he saw me, and something in his expression, guilt and fear and desperate hope, told me he knew. Lydia told you. It wasn't a question. She showed me. I set down the book I'd been pretending to read. Last night, through the spelled glass in the East Tower. He flinched like I'd struck him. Evelyn, why didn't you tell me? I asked, keeping my voice level even though everything inside me was screaming. Before the wedding. Before I fell in love with you. Why didn't you tell me the truth? He moved into the room slowly, like approaching something wild that might bolt. Because I'm a coward. Because every time I've told a female the truth before she loved me completely, the curse reset. Because I thought if I could just make you love me first, if I could show you who I was beyond the beast, then maybe you'd be able to accept it. That's not your choice to make. Anger sparked, hot and righteous. You don't get to decide what I can or can't handle. You don't get to manipulate my emotions by controlling what information I have access to. I know. He sank into the chair across from me, looking more exhausted than I'd ever seen him. You're right. It was selfish and cruel, and I have no defense except that I was desperate. Evelyn, I've been trapped in this curse for 73 years. Do you understand what that means? 73 years of watching the sun set and knowing that at midnight I'll become something monstrous. 73 years of isolation, because anyone who gets close either flees in terror or tries to kill me. You're not a monster, I said quietly. He laughed, bitter and broken. Did you see what I become? How is that anything other than monstrous? I saw you reading my poetry book. The admission made him freeze. I saw you handling the pages with more care than most humans manage. I saw the beast, yes, but I also saw that the beast was still you. Still gentle with the things I love. Still trying to feel close to me even when you thought I couldn't see. That doesn't change what I am. His voice was raw. That doesn't make the beast any less dangerous or terrifying. No, I agreed. But it means the beast isn't all you are. Any more than being barren is all I am. He looked up at that, something flickering in his eyes. Hope, maybe. Or just the desire to hope. I've spent my entire life being reduced to my worst parts. I continued. The daughter who can't shift. The female who can't breed. The disposable one. And you looked past all of that. You saw everything I was beyond my damage and decided it was worth loving. So tell me, Stephen. Why do you think I'm incapable of doing the same for you? Because it's different. He stood, pacing to the window, his back to me, that familiar tell. Your damage doesn't transform you into something that could kill everyone around you. My beast has killed before, Evelyn. In the early years, Before I learned control, 3 people died because I couldn't contain it. The admission hung heavy in the air. Were they innocents? I asked. What? The people who died. Were they innocents, or were they trying to hurt you? He turned, surprise crossing his features. They were assassins, sent by a rival pack during the first year of the curse. They thought I'd be vulnerable during the transformation, that they could kill me while I was changing. They were wrong. Then they knew the risk. I stood, moving toward him. They chose to attack a king during his weakest moment, and your beast defended you. That's not murder. That's survival. You're making excuses for me. No. I'm refusing to let you reduce yourself to your worst moment, just like you refused to reduce me to mine. I stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into his face, the weight of decades bearing down on him. Tell me about the curse. All of it. No more lies by omission. No more protecting me from truths you think I can't handle. He studied me for a long moment, searching my face for something. Then, slowly, he began to speak. The witch I angered was named Morgana. She'd settled in territory that technically belonged to the crown, refused to leave when ordered. I went to negotiate personally, tried to offer her alternative lands, compensation, but she wanted that specific location because it sat on a confluence of ley lines, powerful magic. He moved back to his chair, sinking into it like the memory was a physical weight. When I refused, when I told her that as Alpha King, my word was law, she cursed me. Said I'd spend eternity, becoming the monster I pretended not to be. That I'd never find true love because anyone who saw my real nature would flee in terror. But there's a way to break it, I said. Lydia mentioned. Yes. If a female loves me, truly loves me, not just the king but the beast, the curse breaks. But she has to love both. If she loves me as Stephen and then discovers the beast, fear overwrites love and the curse resets. If she sees the beast first, she never gives Stephen a chance. His smile was bitter. It's a perfect trap. I can't win. How many times has it almost broken? I asked quietly. 4 times in 73 years. 4 females who loved me as Stephen, who might have accepted the beast if I'd given them the chance, but I was too afraid. I waited too long, tried to make sure their love was strong enough, and eventually they discovered the truth on their own. Lydia showing them, or servants gossiping, or simply figuring out that something was wrong with their husband who disappeared every midnight. He met my eyes. Every single one of them left. Not immediately, some tried to pretend they could handle it, but fear is corrosive. Within weeks, they'd find reasons to avoid me. Within months, they'd request annulment, and the curse would reset, and I'd start over. Is that what you expect from me? I asked. That I'll leave once the shock wears off? I don't know what to expect from you. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. You keep surprising me. You refused to be my bride, then chose to stay anyway. You solved my riddle in 2 weeks when others took months. You've shared your damage and your stories and your beautiful, fractured heart. And now you're standing here asking questions instead of running, and I don't know what to do with that. You could try trusting me. I moved closer, kneeling beside his chair so we were eye level. You could try believing that I mean it when I say I love you. Not just the parts of you that are easy to love, but all of it. The king and the beast. The intelligence and the violence. The gentleness and the danger. You say that now. His hand came up, cupping my face with devastating tenderness. But Evelyn, you haven't seen the beast up close. You haven't stood in the same room while it prowls and growls and tests the boundaries of its cage. You've seen it from behind, spelled glass, safe, and distant. It's different when there's nothing between you and 8 feet of claws and fangs. Then let me see it. The words emerged before I'd fully thought them through. But once spoken, I knew they were right. Tonight, no spelled glass, no separate chambers. Let me be there when you transform. Let me see you, really see you, and prove that I'm not going to run. Absolutely not. He stood abruptly, pacing away from me. I won't risk you like that. The beast is strong, Evelyn. If it decided to hurt you, you wouldn't hurt me. I said it with absolute certainty. The beast is still you. Still the male who reads my poetry books with careful claws. Still, The one who gave me a library, because he knew I needed a place to be free. You wouldn't hurt me as Stephen, and you won't hurt me as the beast. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at me. Because I know you. I've spent nearly a month learning who you are, how you think, what you value, what you're afraid of. And I know with absolute certainty that the curse didn't make you a monster. It just revealed what was already there, the strength and danger that comes with being a predator who survived impossible odds. Your beast is the part of you that refused to die, that fought through 73 years of isolation and kept hoping for something better. That's not monstrous. That's extraordinary. I'd used his word, the one he'd called me that night, in his chambers when I'd thought myself worthless. His eyes widened, recognition and something that looked like desperate hope flaring to life. Evelyn. Tonight, I said firmly. At midnight, your chambers. I'll be there when you transform, and I'll prove to you that I'm not going anywhere, that I choose both of you, not just the easy parts. This is insane. But his voice lacked conviction. Probably. I smiled, feeling more certain than I'd felt about anything in my life. But we're both a little bit insane, aren't we? Both a little bit broken? Maybe that's exactly why this will work. He pulled me against him then, his arms coming around me like he was trying to memorize the feel of me, like he was afraid this was the last time he'd get to hold me. If you do this, he said into my hair, if you're there tonight, and it's too much, if you're frightened, promise me you'll run. Promise me you'll save yourself instead of trying to be brave. I promise, I lied. Because I had no intention of running. I'd spent my entire life running from my damage, hiding from truths that hurt too much to face. Tonight, I was going to stand still. Tonight, I was going to look at the beast and see my mate. And if fear tried to make a liar out of my love, I'd just have to be more stubborn than the curse that had stolen 73 years from the male I'd chosen. After all, I'd refused an alpha king once before. Refusing a curse should be simple by comparison. Chapter 8. The Beast and the Bride. The hours between dawn and midnight crawled by with agonizing slowness. I tried to read, to distract myself, but the words blurred on the page. I tried to eat the lunch that appeared in my chambers, but my stomach was twisted too tight to accept food. Finally, I gave up on pretending I was fine and simply paced, counting down the minutes until I'd face the thing Stephen feared most about himself. Lydia appeared at my door around sunset, her expression carefully neutral. I heard about your plan, she said, without preamble. Stephen told me you're insisting on being present for tonight's transformation. Yes. That's either the bravest or most foolish thing I've heard in decades. She studied me intently. Which is it, Evelyn? Bravery or foolishness? Does it matter? I asked. Either way, I'm doing it. It matters if you're doing this out of some misguided sense of obligation, if you think you owe him this because he gave you a library and pretty words. Her voice sharpened. You don't owe anyone access to you, especially not when you're putting yourself in potential danger. It's not obligation. I met her eyes steadily. It's choice. I'm choosing to see all of him, not just the parts he thinks are acceptable, the same way he chose to see all of me. Lydia was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. He loves you, you know, more than I've ever seen him love anyone, which is why he's terrified of tonight. If you run, if fear wins, it won't just reset the curse, it'll break something in him that's already fragile. I'm not going to run. Everyone says that, until they're standing face to face with 8 feet of nightmare. Then I'll be the first one who means it. I straightened my shoulders, drawing on reserves of courage I wasn't sure I possessed. Is there anything I should know? Anything that will help me not do something stupid? Lydia considered. Don't make sudden movements. The beast responds to threat, and quick motion reads as attack. Keep your voice calm and steady. He can understand speech even in that form, though he can't respond clearly. And most importantly, she paused. Remember that he's more afraid of hurting you than you could ever be of being hurt. His greatest fear isn't your rejection. It's losing control and harming you before he can stop himself. The information settled into my mind, filed away for later use. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until tomorrow, if you're still here to thank anyone. But her expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I hope you succeed. I hope you're the one who finally breaks this damned curse. He deserves happiness, even if he doesn't believe it." She left, and I returned to my pacing, my mind racing through everything I knew about Stephen. The male who'd given me a library, who'd listened to my stories like they mattered, who'd called me extraordinary when everyone else had called me broken. The male who became a beast at midnight and read my poetry books with careful claws. I could do this. I would do this, even if I was terrified. At 1:45, I made my way through the fortress to Stephen's private chambers, the stark room I'd seen through spelled glass, designed for containment rather than comfort. Guards stood at the entrance, their expressions carefully blank. "His Majesty is expecting you," one said, opening the door. I stepped through, and the door closed behind me with ominous finality. The room was exactly as I'd seen it. Stone walls, mounted chains, sparse and functional. Stephen stood at the far end, still in human form, wearing simple dark clothes. When he saw me, relief and dread warred across his features. "You came," he said quietly. I said I would. I moved further into the room, noting the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "Are you trying to talk me out of it? Every instinct I have is screaming at me to send you away." His voice was raw. "To lock you safely in your chambers where the beast can't reach you. But you wouldn't go even if I ordered it, would you?" "No." Stubborn. But his lips quirked slightly. "That's what I get for falling in love with someone who refused to be my bride. You could have chosen an obedient female who'd do whatever you said without question," I pointed out. "Where's the fun in that?" He moved closer, his amber eyes searching my face. "Evelyn, last chance. You can still leave. No judgment, no shame. I'll understand if—" I pressed my fingers to his lips, silencing him. "I'm not leaving. Stop trying to protect me from yourself." He caught my hand, pressing a kiss to my palm. "Then at least promise me something. If the beast does anything that frightens you, anything at all, there's a door behind you. It's unlocked. Run. Don't hesitate. Don't try to reason with it. Just run." "I'm not going to need to run. Promise me anyway." I sighed. "Fine. I promise that if your beast actively tries to harm me, I'll run. Happy?" "Not remotely." He released my hand, moving to the center of the room. "It's almost time. You should probably stand near the wall. Give yourself distance." I moved to the wall but didn't press against it, didn't cower. I stood with my chin up, my hands steady at my sides, and watched as the male I loved prepared to become the thing he feared most. "Evelyn." He looked at me one last time, and his expression was devastating. Love and fear and desperate hope all tangled together. "Whatever happens, whatever you see, know that I love you. That loving you has been the best part of these 73 years. Even if this doesn't work, even if you leave, I'll never regret choosing you. I love you too," I said softly. "Both of you, the king and the beast. Don't forget that." Then midnight struck, and the transformation began. It was worse up close. The sound of bones breaking and reforming, the sight of his body convulsing as it restructured itself. He dropped to his knees, a growl tearing from his throat that was half pain, half rage. His spine arched, his limbs lengthening, fur rippling across skin that stretched impossibly. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to flee, to save myself from the monster taking shape before me. I stayed. When it was over, when Stephen had become the beast, I forced myself to keep breathing steadily, to not show the fear hammering against my ribs. The beast rose to its full height, 8 feet of midnight fur, and golden eyes, claws that gleamed in the torchlight, fangs designed for tearing. It was massive, powerful, utterly terrifying. It was my husband. For a long moment, we simply stared at each other. The beast's eyes still that familiar amber. Still Stephen's eyes tracked my every breath, every tiny movement, testing, assessing, trying to determine if I was prey or something else. "Hello," I said quietly, keeping my voice steady like Lydia had suggested. "It's still me, still Evelyn, still your mate." The beast's head tilted slightly, and a low rumble emerged from its chest, not quite a growl, more like a question. I know you're different now, I continued, taking one small step forward. I know you're afraid of scaring me, but I'm not scared. Or, I am scared, but not of you. I'm scared of failing you, of being too weak to see past the fur and fangs to the male underneath. Another step. The beast tensed but didn't retreat. You read my poetry last night, I said softly. After you transformed. You held my book with those claws and read the passages I'd marked. That's how I knew. That's when I understood that the beast wasn't something separate from you. It's just another part of who you are. 3 steps away now. Close enough to see the individual hairs in its fur, the exact shade of gold in its eyes. Close enough that if it wanted to harm me, there'd be no escape. May I? I held out my hand slowly, palm up, the universal gesture of peace. May I touch you? The beast stared at my hand like it was an impossible thing, like my willingness to reach toward it instead of running away defied all logic. Then, carefully, so carefully, it extended one massive paw. I pressed my palm against it, feeling the rough pads, the deadly claws that could shred me in an instant. The paw was warm, solid, real. See? I whispered. Still you. Still the male who gave me a library. Still the one who listened to my stories. Just bigger. The beast made a sound half whine, half something else. Its other paw came up, and with impossible gentleness, touched my face. The claw traced my cheekbone with the same tenderness Stephen had shown countless times in human form. And I understood. The curse had never made him a monster. It had just given his protective instincts teeth. I'm not afraid of you, I said, leaning into that careful touch. I'm awed by you. Amazed that you've survived 73 years of this and still managed to be kind. Still managed to see me as something worth loving. The beast's eyes glistened. Could beasts cry? Apparently, this one could. A single tear tracked down through the fur, and something in my chest cracked open. I moved closer, wrapping my arms around the beast's massive torso as far as they'd reach, pressing my face against fur that smelled like pine and snow and Stephen. I choose you, I whispered against its chest. Both of you. Every version of you. The king who gave me riddles. The male who read my poetry. The beast who's trying so hard not to scare me. All of it. All of you. I choose all of you. The beast's arms came around me carefully, so carefully, returning the embrace with a gentleness that should have been impossible for something so large and dangerous. I felt its chest rumble, felt the rapid beat of its heart against my cheek, and then the world exploded in light. Golden radiance burst from the beast, from me, from the space between us where our bodies touched. Magic, old and powerful and absolute, surged through the room. The beast roared, but not in pain. In release, in relief, in joy. The light intensified until I had to close my eyes against it, but I didn't let go. I held on through the transformation, through the magic rewriting reality, through whatever the curse was doing in its death throes. When the light finally faded, when I could see again, I wasn't holding a beast anymore. Stephen knelt on the stone floor, fully human, fully himself, but different, somehow lighter, like a weight he'd carried for decades had finally been lifted. His amber eyes were wet with tears, his expression a mixture of disbelief and wonder. It broke, he said hoarsely. Evelyn, the curse broke. I can feel it, it's gone. How? I asked, though I thought I knew. True love. He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair. Not love for the king or the male or even the beast alone. Love for all of it. Unconditional, unwavering, brave enough to stand in front of a monster and say, I choose you. That's what broke it. That's what I'd been searching for all these years. You're not a monster, I said fiercely. You never were. No. But I was cursed. And now, he pulled back, cupping my face in his hands. Now I'm free. We're free. To build a life together without secrets, without separate chambers, without me disappearing every midnight. Just us. Just us. I agreed, smiling through my own tears. The broken king and the disposable daughter. What a pair we make. Extraordinary, he corrected. We're extraordinary. He kissed me then, deep and thorough, and full of promises for all the tomorrows we'd have together. Promises of mornings spent reading in our library, evenings walking through his mother's gardens, nights where we'd stay together until dawn without fear of transformation or discovery. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, I noticed something. Your chambers, I said, looking around. They're different. The stark stone walls had softened somehow, warm tapestries appearing where there'd been nothing. The chains had vanished entirely. The windows, previously barred, now stood open to the night air. The curse breaking had transformed the space from a prison to a sanctuary. It's adjusting to new purpose, Stephen said, following my gaze. This room was built by the curse, maintained by it. Now that it's broken. He smiled. Now it can be whatever we want it to be. What do we want it to be? I asked. A beginning. He stood, pulling me up with him. The place where we chose each other completely, where love won over fear, where broken became whole. I like that, I said softly. A beginning. We left the room hand in hand, walking through corridors that felt different now, less like a fortress and more like a home. Word had already spread somehow. Servants we passed bowed with genuine smiles, and I heard whispered congratulations in our wake. Lydia waited in the main hall, her expression transforming from concern to relief when she saw us both whole and happy. It worked, she breathed. 73 years, and it finally worked. It worked, Stephen confirmed, his arm around my waist. The curse is broken. About damn time. But Lydia's eyes were wet. Congratulations, Your Majesties. You've earned this. She bowed and left, and we continued to our chambers, the comfortable rooms where we'd spent so many evenings talking. But tonight would be different. Tonight, we wouldn't part at midnight. Tonight, we'd stay together until dawn and beyond. 6 months later, I stood in the library Stephen had given me, writing our story down. Not as a fairy tale, but as truth. The broken king and the disposable daughter who'd found each other and refused to be anything less than whole. Stephen appeared in the doorway, reading over my shoulder. You're writing about us, he observed. Someone should. I set down my pen. It's a good story. Girl refuses to be king's bride. King gives her riddles. Girl solves them and discovers king is cursed. Girl loves him anyway. Curse breaks. They live happily ever after. That's a very simplified version. He moved behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. You're leaving out the best parts. Like what? Like how you stood in front of a beast and didn't run. How you saw every broken part of me and called it extraordinary. How you chose me, when you had every reason to leave. He pressed a kiss to my neck. How you're still choosing me every day. That goes both ways, I pointed out. You chose a female who couldn't shift, couldn't give you heirs the traditional way, couldn't do any of the things a queen is supposed to do. No, he agreed. You just gave me freedom, love, and a reason to live beyond mere survival. Clearly, you're useless. I laughed, turning in his arms to face him. Utterly worthless. Completely disposable. His smile was warm, familiar, home. Which is why I'm so glad I get to keep you forever. Forever is a long time. Not nearly long enough. He pulled me closer. I wasted 73 years waiting for you. I intend to make the most of however many we have left. A knock at the door interrupted us. One of the younger servants, holding a message. Your Majesties, forgiveness for the interruption. But there's news from the southern packs. A situation requiring the Alpha King's attention. Stephen sighed. Duty calls. Go, I said, kissing him quickly. I'll be here when you get back. Promise? He asked it like he always did, like he still sometimes couldn't believe I wouldn't disappear. Promise. I gave him the answer he needed. I'm not going anywhere. He left, and I returned to writing our story. But I changed the ending slightly, making it more honest. They lived. Not happily ever after, because happiness isn't constant. But they lived fully, messily, completely. They chose each other every day. Even on days when choosing was hard. They built a life from broken pieces and called it beautiful. They proved that curses could be broken, that love could be brave, that extraordinary was something you became when you stopped hiding from your truth. And in the darkness of their chamber, She could never tell if he was king or beast or simply the male who'd chosen to walk beside her. She'd finally learned it didn't matter. He was just hers, and she was his. And that was enough. I read over the words, satisfied. This was the story I'd tell our future. Whether that meant adopted children we'd take in from cruel families, or simply the life we'd build together in this fortress that had stopped being a prison and started being home. Through the window, I could see the mountain valley stretching endlessly, beautiful and wild. Somewhere out there, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Midnight would come again, as it always did. But this time, when it struck, Stephen would still be human, still be himself, still be mine. The curse was broken. We were free. And our story, the one I'd write and rewrite 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways, had finally found its happy ending. Not because magic fixed everything, but because we'd chosen each other, damage and all, and decided that was enough. That we were enough. That love, in the end, was always enough. Epilogue. 1 year later, I woke to sunlight streaming through the windows of our chambers, the comfortable rooms we'd shared for the past year, where midnight was just another hour instead of a curse marker. Stephen's arm was draped across my waist, his breathing deep and even in sleep. I allowed myself a moment to simply watch him. Even after a year, I still sometimes caught myself expecting him to vanish at midnight, to transform into the beast he'd been for so long. But the curse was truly broken. He was free. We were free. "You're staring," he murmured without opening his eyes. "I can feel it. Can't help it. You're very starable." That's not a word. But he smiled, pulling me closer. "Good morning, my love. Good morning." I pressed a kiss to his jaw. "We have that meeting with the council today, the one about the southern territories." Do we have to? You're the Alpha King." "Yes, we have to. I liked it better when I was just a cursed beast hiding in my chambers." But he was already sitting up, stretching. At least then, I had a good excuse for avoiding politics. I laughed, climbing out of bed and moving to the wardrobe. Over the past year, I'd accumulated quite a collection of clothes, befitting a queen, elegant dresses in deep jewel tones, practical outfits for walking the fortress grounds, formal attire for state occasions. But my favorite was still the midnight blue dress I'd worn to our first almost wedding. The one I'd been wearing when I refused him. I caught Stephen watching me in the mirror as I dressed, his expression soft. "What?" I asked. "Just thinking about how different life is now. How much better." He came up behind me, helping with the buttons I couldn't reach. A year ago, I was alone, cursed, counting down the hours until midnight with dread. Now I wake up with you beside me, and midnight is just midnight. Another hour in a day full of them. "Do you miss it sometimes?" I asked quietly. "The beast?" He was silent for a moment, considering. "Parts of it, the strength, the heightened senses, the simplicity of existing without the weight of a crown. But no, I don't miss the curse. I don't miss the fear, the isolation, the certainty that I'd never be fully known. You gave me that, Evelyn, the chance to be completely seen and still be loved. You gave me the same thing." I turned in his arms. "Before you, I thought being broken meant being worthless. You taught me different. We taught each other." He kissed me softly. "That's what love does, it transforms. Not by fixing what's wrong, but by making what's different beautiful." A knock at the door interrupted us. "Your Majesties, the council is gathering. We'll be there shortly," Stephen called back. Then, to me, "Ready to be regal and political?" "No, but I'll do it anyway." I smiled. "That's what queens do, apparently. That's what my queen does." He took my hand. "Come on. Let's go govern." The council meeting was as tedious as expected. Disputes over territory boundaries, trade agreements that needed approval, requests for the Alpha King's intervention in pack conflicts. But I found I didn't mind as much as I'd expected. Stephen valued my input, asked my opinion on matters I'd never thought I'd have a voice in. Being queen wasn't just a title. It was a partnership. After the meeting, we walked through his mother's gardens, our daily ritual when weather permitted. The night-blooming flowers she'd planted had been joined by day-bloomers I'd requested, creating a space that was beautiful at any hour. "I've been thinking," Stephen said as we walked, "about something you said when you first arrived, about writing stories to escape reality. What about it? You don't do that anymore. Write those fairy tales, I mean. The ones you used to tell yourself about broken girls becoming something more." I considered. "I guess I don't need to escape anymore. Reality is good now." "It is." He stopped, turning to face me. "But I think you should write them anyway. Not to escape, but to share. There are other broken girls out there who need stories about healing, other people who think being different means being worthless. You have a gift, Evelyn. A way of seeing possibilities that others miss. Maybe it's time to share that." The idea took root immediately, exciting and terrifying at once. "You think people would want to read my stories?" "I know I do, and I suspect I'm not alone." He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. "You don't have to decide now. Just think about it, about using your words to help others the way you helped yourself." I kissed him, overwhelmed by how well he knew me, how he saw potential in parts of myself I'd dismissed as weaknesses. "I'll think about it," I promised. That evening, as the sun set over the mountains, I sat in our library, the secret one he'd given me, the place where I'd first admitted I was falling in love with him. I pulled out fresh parchment and began to write. Not a fairy tale exactly, and not quite our story either, but something in between, a tale of a girl who couldn't do what everyone expected, and a boy who was more than what everyone feared, and how they found each other in darkness and chose to make light. Stephen found me hours later, deep into the writing, my hand cramping but my mind racing with possibilities. "How's it going?" he asked, reading over my shoulder. "Good, I think. Maybe. I don't know." I set down the pen. Is it stupid? Writing stories when there are important things I should be doing? Stories are important things. He pulled up a chair beside me. They teach us how to be human, how to hope, how to survive when survival seems impossible. Don't diminish what you create, Evelyn. It matters. I leaned against him, taking comfort in his solid presence. Read it to me? Tell me if it's terrible. He picked up the pages, and in that warm voice I'd come to love, he read my words back to me. And hearing them in his voice, I realized he was right. This did matter. Not because it would change the world, but because it might change someone's world, might help one broken person feel less alone. "It's beautiful," he said when he finished. "Your best work yet. Keep writing it." So I did. That night and the nights after, the story grew, evolved, became something I hadn't known I could create, and when I finally finished it months later, when I held the completed manuscript in my hands, I felt something I'd never felt before. Pride. Not the kind that came from achievements or accolades, but the quiet satisfaction of creating something true, something that came from the deepest parts of myself and might help someone else find their way through darkness. Stephen arranged for it to be published, used his influence as Alpha King to ensure it reached PAX across the territories, and to my shock, people read it, wrote letters thanking me, sharing their own stories of feeling broken and finding healing. Young females who couldn't shift, males who didn't fit their PAX expectations, humans living in wolf territories, trying to find their place. All of them found something in my words that spoke to their pain. All of them felt less alone, because I'd been brave enough to share my damage. 2 years after the curse broke, "Tell me the riddle again," I requested, curled against Stephen in our bed one night. "Again? You've asked me to tell it at least 100 times, and I'll ask 100 more. Tell me." He smiled, indulgent. "What is born of pain, feeds on silence, and dies when spoken?" "A lie," I answered, same as always. "But also a curse, and also fear. It's all three, isn't it? That's why it worked so well. You're reading layers that weren't necessarily there." But his eyes told me I was right. "Though I suppose the best riddles have multiple answers." "Tell me a new one," I said, struck by sudden inspiration. "Give me a riddle I haven't solved yet." He thought for a moment, his fingers trailing through my hair. Then, "What is given freely, grows with time, survives all tests, and requires no answer?" I turned it over in my mind. But the answer came quickly, obviously. Love. See, you're too good at this now. He kissed my forehead. I'll have to work harder on the next one. Or maybe, I said softly, we're just speaking the same language now, understanding each other so well that riddles become easy. I like that better. He pulled me closer. Speaking of understanding, I have something to tell you. The seriousness in his tone made me prop myself up on one elbow. What is it? We've received word from a neighboring pack. They have a situation: 3 orphaned pups whose parents died in a challenge. The pack is willing to care for them, but... He paused. I thought perhaps we might offer them a home here. If you're interested, if you think you're ready. My heart stuttered. We'd talked about this. About building a family through adoption since I couldn't bear children. But talking about it and actually doing it were different things. You're sure? I asked. You don't have to do this just because. I'm not doing it because of anything except that I want to. His hand found mine, squeezing gently. I want to share what we've built with children who need it. I want to teach them what you taught me, that being different isn't the same as being broken. That family is what you create, not just what you're born into. Yes, I said, tears streaming down my face. Yes, let's bring them home. Let's show them they're wanted. And we did. 3 pups, 2 boys and a girl, ages 5, 7, and 9, arrived a week later. Frightened, grieving, unsure of their place in this massive fortress with the legendary Alpha King. But slowly, they learned. Learned that Stephen was gentle despite his power. Learned that I understood what it meant to feel unwanted. Learned that home wasn't about bloodlines or perfect families. It was about choosing each other every day and meaning it. The youngest, a boy named Finn, couldn't shift. Like me, he'd reached an age where he should have transformed, and nothing had happened. His previous pack had started to whisper, to question his value. One night, I found him in the library, tears streaming down his face as he read one of my published stories, the one about a girl who couldn't do what everyone expected. This is about you, isn't it? He asked when he saw me. You're the girl in the story. Yes, I said, sitting beside him. I couldn't shift either, still can't. But you're the queen. How did you? He struggled for words. How did you become important, without being able to do the important thing? Because shifting isn't the important thing, Finn. Being brave is, being kind is, being yourself. Even when the world tells you that self isn't good enough, that's what matters. I pulled him close. You are already important. Already valuable. Shifting or not shifting doesn't change that. Promise? His voice was so small, so hopeful. Promise. I held him while he cried, while years of feeling inadequate finally found release. You're home now. You're wanted. And nothing not shifting or failing to shift or anything else will change that. Stephen found us there an hour later, both of us asleep against the bookshelves. He carried Finn to bed, then returned for me. You're good at this, he murmured as we walked to our chambers. Being a mother. I'm terrified I'll mess it up. That just means you care enough to try your best. That's all anyone can do. He kissed me softly. Thank you. For saying yes to this. For helping me build a family. Thank you for asking. I leaned against him, exhausted but content. For seeing the possibility when I was too afraid to. 3 years after the curse broke, we stood in the gardens, his mother's flowers and mine, blooming together in riotous color. The 3 pups played nearby, their laughter echoing off stone walls that had once held only silence. Do you ever regret it? I asked Stephen. Taking me as your mate instead of someone who could have given you biological heirs. Someone who fit better? Never. He didn't hesitate. Not once in 3 years. Not once in all the years we'll have together. You gave me something far more valuable than heirs, Evelyn. You gave me a life worth living. We gave each other that, I corrected. Yes, we did. He pulled me close, and we watched our children chosen, not born to us, but ours nonetheless play in the fading light. In the distance, midnight approached. But it held no fear now, no dread. It was just another hour in a day full of them. Just another moment in the life we'd built from broken pieces. Tell me a story, Stephen requested, same as he had so many times over the years. So I did. I told him about a broken king and a disposable daughter who found each other and refused to be anything less than whole. I told him about curses that broke and promises that held. I told him about love that was brave enough to see monsters and call them beautiful. I told him our story, and when I finished, when the last words faded into the evening air, he whispered against my hair, "Best story I've ever heard." "It's not over yet," I reminded him. "We still have chapters to write. Then let's make them good ones." He took my hand. "Come on. The children will want their bedtime stories, and I suspect you're the only one who can tell them right." We walked back toward the fortress toward home, and I thought about riddles and curses and the impossible journey that had brought us here. What is born of pain, feeds on silence, and dies when spoken. A lie, a curse, a fear, but also, in its own way, a promise. Because when lies die and curses break, and fear loses its grip, what's left is truth. Real, messy, complicated truth. And our truth was this. We'd found each other in darkness. We'd chosen each other despite damage. We'd built a life that honored both the beast and the bride, both the broken and the whole. We'd proven that love wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence. And we were very, very good at persisting. Behind us, the sun set over the mountains. Ahead, midnight waited just another hour, nothing more. And between sunset and midnight, in all the hours that made up our days, we lived, fully, messily, completely, together, always together, forever. If Evelyn and Stephen's journey touched your heart, you'll love The Alpha's Second Chance, the book shown on your screen right now. Another powerful story about damaged souls, impossible choices, and love that transforms. Grab your copy using the link in the description below. And if this story meant something to you, don't let it disappear into the algorithm. Hit like, drop a comment about which moment broke you most, and share this with someone who needs to hear that broken doesn't mean worthless. See you in the next story.